to Warren for inviting me. It's great to come back 10 years later to share some updates. But I'm not really going to give an update of, this is the 10th anniversary of Scratch this year. That's not what I was going to talk about exactly, since Warren specifically asked about me talking about Seymour Papert, and it does seem timeless. It was a little over a year ago that Seymour passed away. So in the past year I have been reflecting a lot about Seymour's contributions and his impact on me. So I'm going to focus on that, but I will weave it back into the work that we're doing today and about how the work has been so influenced by Seymour. It turns out that it was 10 years since I was here and 10 years since we launched Scratch. As I thought back, actually it's exactly 35 years since I met Seymour Papert. So I met Seymour in 1982 at the West Coast Computer Fair. So maybe a few of you have been around long enough to remember this. And you can think of it as in the early days of the personal computer. You know, personal computers came out in the late 1970s. And the West Coast Computer Fair was sort of bring together a collection of industry people, but people who are looking to change the world through computing. It's a little bit the spirit of a maker fair, but long before anybody was talking about makers or maker fairs. And I went there at the time. I was covering Silicon Valley for Business Week magazine. I was working as a journalist. And so I knew a lot about technology by writing about it for Business Week. And I had a background where I had done some things with technology. But Seymour Papert gave the keynote at this West Coast Computer Fair in 1982. And when I heard Seymour talk, it really changed the way I thought about things. He opened up a new way for me to be thinking about things. And it's pretty fair to say that after hearing that, I sort of spent the next 35 years from then until now trying to follow up on Seymour's vision. I was so influenced by it and continue to work at trying to fulfill Seymour's dream. And at the time, when Seymour was giving the keynote, it was partly because the logo programming language that Seymour and others had developed was just being introduced on Apple II computers. So that was the big thing that was being announced, that that this logo language that had been developed at MIT by Seymour and others was being introduced. It was a way to bring programming to kids, and logo got out to the schools in a big way following this through the 1980s. And again, this was the first time I'd really played with logo. And although I was excited to see some of the particular things, I remember actually sitting down and playing with logo while I was there at the West Coast Computer Fair. Much more than logo itself, what really captured my imagination were the ideas underlying logo, and Seymour's ideas about the role of technology in the world. And by listening to Seymour talk, I really saw that he was sort of rethinking what learning was about, rethinking what technology might be, rethinking what childhood might be. So it really turned upside down the way I thought about many different things. So then I started finding out much more about Seymour. And though that was 1982, Seymour had been starting to talk about these things from quite a while before. He came to MIT in the 1960s and started working on logo on computers costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. At the time, it seemed crazy because he would bring kids into MIT, but he foresaw that someday the technology would be inexpensive enough and ubiquitous so that kids would have access to it. He was trying to plan for the day to say, how can we make use of this in meaningful ways? In 1971, full 10 years before I met Seymour and Cynthia Solomon wrote this paper that, if you haven't read it, I think it's a good thing to read. So this is now, how many years ago is that? So it's 40 some years, not quite 50 years, called 20 Things to Do with the Computer. And in this paper, it was really trying to give a new vision. That until that time, when people thought about computers and kids, they thought that, well, computers could be this great way of delivering information to kids or giving instruction to kids. And Seymour really did have this different vision. That this paper was all about what kids could do with the technology to express themselves. So the 20 things were things about how kids could use computers to control robots, how kids could use it to compose music. It was all the things that kids could create by doing things with the technology. And again, that was a very different vision than I had ever heard before, or had thought about before. And it was also a focus on how it sort of empower kids in new ways. It was really trying to see how kids would be able to, be able to take control of the technology. In Seymour's phrase, he said it shouldn't be the computer programming the child, but the child programming the computer. And again, that idea of empowering kids to let them express themselves with the technology was something that really caught my attention. Just 2 years before I met Seymour, he published Mindstorms. This Mindstorms came out in 1980. And that was the book that really started to spread Seymour's ideas. And these days, you mention Mindstorms to a lot of people, they associate it with the Lego robotics product. But of course, the Lego robotics product was named after Seymour's book. Actually, a little twist you might not know about, as Lego was working on their first robotics product, they were first thinking about calling the actual brick itself Seymour, in honor of Seymour. They ended up not doing that. It was called the RCX and later gone, the current version is EV3. But they did name the overall product Mindstorms in honor of Seymour. Because again, they'd been so inspired by Seymour's idea of empowering kids to design and create. But again, that was in the late 90s when Mindstorms, the robotics product, came out. It was 1980 that Seymour wrote this book, still in the very early days of personal computers, when people were first, starting to get out into the general culture. And Seymour's book was really sort of putting a stake in the ground about how computers could and should enter the lives of kids. And really talking about the ways that computers could be a tool that kids could use to, again, design, create, express themselves. As Warren mentioned before, Seymour had worked with Jean Piaget before coming to MIT, and a lot of his ideas about child development came from his work with Piaget, and Piaget's idea that children actively construct new knowledge. That knowledge isn't given to kids, but they actively construct knowledge through their interaction in the world. And Seymour built upon that, saying, yeah, kids actively build knowledge, and the way they build knowledge is by constructing things in the world. So there are these two types of construction. The kids construct things in the world in order to construct new knowledge. And Seymour saw there was this back and forth of kids construct ideas, that kids construct things in the world, and that helps them build new knowledge, and that gives them ideas of new things to construct in the world, which gives them opportunities to construct new knowledge, and this constant cycling back and forth between building in the world and building in the mind. And Seymour saw what was special about the computer was that it would enable kids to construct a wide range of new things. That the computer was this universal machine to allow kids to construct music, or construct programs to control their robots, or construct poems on the screen. So the construct seemed very broad, that the kids could create so many different things. So that was sort of this vision that Seymour had that I found such a compelling vision of providing opportunities for kids to create on the screen. Now, parts of Seymour's vision clearly have gotten out to the world in a significant way. That Seymour's ideas about the computers becoming ubiquitous and entering the lives of kids and being easily accessible for kids certainly has come about. The idea, though, that he had, the vision that he had of kids being fluent with the technology so that they could express themselves and create things fluently is something that I think is still the not fully fulfilled dream. And again, products like Logo gave it a first start of certain ways that kids could create with the technology. And of course, there are many products you can point to today that give kids some ways of creating with technology. But it hasn't really happened to the degree that Seymour was really looking for. If you really believe that it should be a fluency the same way kids learn to write, they should be able to express themselves with technology in all the different ways. Actually, 20 years after the publication of Mindstorms, Seymour wrote a paper where he looked back at the subtitle of Mindstorms, Children, Computers, and Powerful Ideas, and he said, people paid a lot of attention to the first two parts and not the third. They probably thought a lot about children and computers, but somehow the powerful ideas got lost. And the ideas that come about when you're constructing things and developing a creative thinker through this process of building things, which gives you new ideas, somehow that got lost, and that people focused on how can we connect kids and computers, but not so much about how we can really use it to build new ways of thinking, new ways for kids to engage with ideas in the world. And that was something that he continued to work on and think about and advocate And often we become very frustrated. We become very frustrated with the way the logo got out to the world. I mean, logo got out to millions of kids around the world, but not always in the way that Seymour imagined. So even when his things got out to a lot of kids, he was never very satisfied with the way it got out, because it oftentimes wasn't enabling kids to really design, create, express themselves, connect with powerful ideas in the ways that he might. And in many ways, I think you can see all the work that I've been doing over those last 35 years is trying to fulfill Seymour's dream. The work that we did with the Lego company on Lego Mindstorms, Lego We Do, and other products are all steps towards trying to give kids greater capabilities of designing, creating, expressing themselves with technology. And then very specifically, our work on Scratch, now 10 years, launched 10 years ago, was again a way to try to carry Seymour's ideas into the 21st century, to try to take those same ideas that Seymour was talking about in Mindstorms in 1980, or in that 20 Things to Do with a Computer in 1971. We still can't do all 20 of those things, so it's still a good roadmap for things that we need to be doing, and things that we're still trying to do with our work on Scratch and other things. So I did want to talk a little bit about the work that we do on Scratch and how it was influenced and inspired by Seymour's thinking and the ways that we're trying to fulfill Seymour's dreams in our work on Scratch. And when we talk about Scratch these days, we often talk about the fact that it was guided by 4 design principles that we call the 4 P's of creative thinking: projects, passion, peers, and play. That we want to provide opportunities for kids to create their own projects based on their passions in collaboration with peers in a playful spirit. Because we think if kids are going to develop as creative thinkers, which we think is the most important thing that we can do, is to help kids develop as creative thinkers, that this is the best way of doing it, by giving them opportunities to create projects based on their passions in collaboration with peers in a playful spirit. And each of those 4 is deeply grounded in Seymour's thinking. So these are all ideas that I got from working with Seymour over the years. So I want to go through them one by one and say a little bit about how Seymour had talked about these ideas and how we're trying to put them into practice. So, in fact, I gave a talk. We had a big celebration of Seymour's work earlier this year, and in talking about the way that what I was trying to do with Seymour's work, at first I was going to call it putting Papert into practice. I always liked alliteration, as you can tell from the 4 P's. But as I thought about putting Papert into practice, I realized that Seymour would not have liked that. That's sort of too linear, too direct. He says you don't sort of create movements by sort of, that sounds too top down. You're going to deliver something by putting it into practice. So instead I call it the seeds that Seymour sowed. So still alliterative, right? I sort of like that metaphor more, that Seymour was sowing these seeds, and Seymour had these great ideas, and I think what we're trying to do is to nurture those seeds that Seymour sowed. So Seymour put these ideas out there, and some of the seeds that Seymour sowed have been growing, very, very strongly. Others, still need a lot of tending to. Others have been stomped out by different people in different ways because they don't fit well within the system. So I think a lot of what we're doing through our work with Scratch and trying to promote these 4 P's of creative learning is trying to nurture those seeds that Seymour sowed. So I'm going to go through them one by one. So start with projects. I'm going to start with a video of Seymour talking about some of the ways that he thought about projects. So I'll start with, let Seymour do some talking. Then I'll come back and talk about it.
I don't know whether I had somebody teach me. Sometimes I might fill in the gap here and there. If I don't know something, I go out and I try to undertake a project. I try to see what different people have said and get involved in debate about it. The same thing applies to children. I'd like them to be able to acquire ideas by using them to make something, to achieve a purpose, to achieve a project. And in doing this, they are not simply banking in the vaults of their heads ideas that somebody else has pre-digested for them. They reinvent the ideas as they use them.
I think a few things to highlight there. He says then reinvent the ideas as they use them. Again, that gets to this Piagetian notion of kids constructing ideas, that they're not just ideas delivered to them, but they reinvent the ideas, and that's how they make a strong connection with the ideas. I also like how Seymour is really focused on that they use the ideas to do something that's meaningful to them. There's oftentimes a lot of people talk about we have to help kids understand ideas. And Seymour wasn't so much talking, he would say you understand it through using it. It was always about using it to make a project. So Seymour really wanted to say that what we want kids to do is that they have to use ideas. They learn about things by using it. It's not just sort of being, having someone explain it to you or you read about it, but you use it. And this really goes against traditional wisdom in a lot of educational circles, where often people say, well, first you better learn the basics, and then you can make use of it. That's like the traditional wisdom. I mean, it continues to be. You go to a project-oriented schools and people will be skeptical and say, well, of course, the kids first better learn the basics, and then you can make use of it. And Seymour said, no, that you should learn it while working on projects, not after. You should learn the ideas while working on projects, through work on projects, in the context of projects. That's how you do it. As you can see in this video, he applied it to himself. That's how he learned about things. And again, Seymour is one of the most greatest learners of all time. Seymour was constantly playing with ideas and learning new things. And he did it by undertaking projects. And he wanted to bring those same possibilities for kids. And again, I think we tried to take this seriously as we worked on Scratch. You go to the Scratch website, and the Scratch website is totally based around projects. You go to the homepage and it says 25 million projects shared. We just passed 25 million projects that have been shared on the site from kids around the world. Every day there's 30,000 new projects shared by kids around the world. If you go to the profile page for any of the members of the Scratch community, it will show the number of shared projects they have. It doesn't show how many points they have, or number of rewards they have, or number of times they've been featured on the homepage. It's the portfolio of projects. That's the currency of Scratch, is projects. And to us that seems so obvious and so natural. But take a look at most learning to code websites. There's so much emphasis, so much interest in learning to code these days. It's not about projects. It's about, let's give this puzzle for kids to solve, a problem for kids to solve. And again, I have nothing against solving puzzles. When I was growing up, I loved to solve puzzles. I still love solving puzzles. It's not that there's anything wrong about solving puzzles, but if we really want kids to develop as creative thinkers and connect with the deep ideas, just giving them a set of disconnected puzzles is not the way to do it. They'll learn something from that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do. But for all the reasons Seymour was saying, we want it to be based on projects, where kids can start with an idea, imagining something new, testing it out, building something based on that idea, sharing it with someone else, getting feedback, refining it, adapting it based on the feedback and based on their experiences. That's sort of the project, process. And that's the way you make deep connections with ideas, is when you're working with it that way. And also you learn about the whole process, the creative process this way. It's not just learning the ideas, but learning about the process, how to start with the inkling of an idea and carry it through to a project. And again, that's the most important thing for people to be learning. So again, that's a little bit on Seymour's view of projects and how to influence us with Scratch and other projects and other things we've worked on. The second P, passion. So again, I'll start with a video clip of Seymour talking on this topic.
What we really have to think about is what produces involvement, engagement, what grabs the individual. And so it's much more related to love than to logic. It's much more related to sex than to abstraction. It's much more related to how you see yourselves fitting into the social and cultural fabric, including how you see television. Is it something that's being done to you or something you want to appropriate? That it's a matter of knowing how to put subject matter in the right sort of logical order in order for people to understand it. Education has very little to do with explanation. It has to do with engagement, falling in love with the material.
I love that last line. Education has very little to do with explanation. How many educators would say that? again, this is sort of some radical thinking that has very little to do with explanation. It has to do with engagement, with falling in love, with the material. And again, Seymour really felt it's not just about coming up with better explanations. There's nothing wrong with better explanations. Of course, good explanations are better than bad explanations. But he said that's not what's going to be really what transforms the lives of kids, is by helping them get engaged with the ideas of falling in love with that. And again, look at Mindstorms. Seymour used the word love a lot in the foreword of Mindstorms, where he talks about the gears of my childhood. And he talks about his childhood experiences playing with gears. And they started playing with mathematical ideas, with playing with the gears. And most people would leave it there. It's pretty obvious how playing with gears, you start to learn about fractions, and there are other types of mathematical ideas by playing with gears. But Seymour was very explicit there, and he says, it was not just about, the reason it made a difference is he fell in love with gears. He formed a relationship with gears, and that's what made all the difference. And that's what he says in there. And again, for us, for me, this was again really compelling for me, that the most important thing is help people find this deep connection with ideas. So with everything that we do, that's always at the center of it. They were always looking to see how can we connect to kids' passions. So of course we want to sort of focus on ideas. We also follow on interests. So we always say, whenever we start something new, we always say we want to sort of connect to powerful ideas, but also connect to learner interests. And the challenge is how to do both of those well at the same time. No one's saying that it's easy. We're always looking to see how can we make sure that we connect to interests as well as ideas. And again, that can be challenging. On the surface you can see, one reaction people have is, well, we all know that different kids have different interests and different passions. So if you're a teacher with 30 kids and they're all following their own interests, their own passions, and there's 30 different projects going on, how am I possibly going to manage all of this? And those are challenges that people point to. But that's the only way that kids are really going to make deep connections with these ideas. And I really believe that. So how can we provide ways for different kids to follow up on things based on their interests, but still make connections to important ideas? And that's what we're always looking at, what we're doing, and then how can we support that process to make sure that we give kids the support they need. Because just following their interests doesn't mean they're going to learn it on their own. That's not what Seymour is saying. That's not what we're saying. It's not that you're so motivated by your ideas to learn everything on your own. But you want to sort of let kids follow their own fantasies, but then provide them enough support that they can make those fantasies into realities. And how can we do that? So again, in Scratch, that's something, again, we take seriously, that as we were developing Scratch, I remember in the beginning, some people said, well, if you make it that you can focus just on making games, then you can design it so it's much easier to support kids' work on games, because you know that everyone is working on the same type of project. So you can provide better support materials, you can customize the different programming blocks so that it's focused on making a certain type of game, and that'll make it much easier for kids to get started. And we said, no, not all kids are going to make games, and certainly not any one particular type of game. We want kids to be able to work on all sorts of different things. So if you look at the Scratch website, you see this incredible diversity of things that kids created, and that's the thing that makes us proud. We're proud that there's 25 million projects. We're even more proud about the diversity of the projects there. So you go to the website, see everything from animated stories to interactive birthday cards to animated comic strips to virtual construction kits to recreations of classic video games to dress-up doll games to tutorials to animated art to science simulations. That you see just all of these different things that kids are creating. And for me, that's one of the indicators of success. Whether it's for the Scratch website or when we do a workshop, when we're looking at success, we don't do it with pre-test and post-test. If we do a workshop and we see that there's a wide variety of projects, to us, that's an important indicator of success. Because it's an indicator to us that kids are working on something that they care about. So they're much more likely to make deep connections to the ideas. Again, it's not the only indicator we should look for, but to us, it's a really important indicator, the idea about passion. The third P is peers. Because we know that learning is a social activity. Do we learn with and from others? So we're always focused on how can we help people learn with and from peers. And again, deeply influenced by Seymour, in one of the later chapters of Mindstorms called Images from a Learning Society, or Images of a Learning Society, Seymour starts by talking about the Samba schools of Brazil. Seymour spent time in Brazil and was fascinated by the Samba schools. These are I don't have a video here, just an image. The Samba schools is where people from the community come together to develop and practice the songs and the dances for the annual carnival. And in the Samba schools, it's people with all different degrees of expertise, of all different ages. So it's people from across the community come together, and they all play different roles, and they all benefit from the fact that there's all these different people coming together. So Seymour spent time at the Samba schools, and then wanted to try to support that same type of learning community where people with lots of different, degrees of expertise, different ages coming together. It's one way that he saw getting beyond this problem of how's one person going to manage 30 learners. Well, no, it's not one person managing 30 learners. It's a community that's all learning from one another. That's one of the ways that you start to deal with that problem. In a school setting, it's older kids helping younger kids, and people from the community coming in and supporting it. So it's all the ways that people can support one another is what Seymour's image of what a learning society would be. And this is probably an area where there's been the biggest change in the 35 years since I met Seymour. Because at the time when Seymour was writing about it, the technology was not really ready to fully support that social dimension of learning. The internet was not something that people had access to in 1982. So if I probably think about the thing where my own thinking has changed the most in the last 35 years, and the ways in which we've been able to really add new dimensions to what Seymour was doing, is probably in this area. Although Seymour was talking about this, there was a lot where, if you still went to a lot of the ways logo was used, of course kids in a classroom might learn from one another, but in many places it was kids working on their project, and that was it. It was somewhat isolated. And of course, as we were developing Scratch, we started like 14 years ago, when it was launched 10 years ago, we started working on it right as the social internet was spreading. And we started working on it right when Flickr was coming out. People were starting their first social websites were coming out where people could share with one another. So we were very influenced by that. We saw the opportunity to support the type of learning that Seymour had talked about in the Samba schools. So we really thought about Scratch as a type of Samba school, online, and how we could have people come together, learn with and from one another in this. So the timing was right for doing something quite different than it was possible before. So again, if you look at the Scratch website, it was like, this is this one project, this is one of the 25 million projects, but it's one that caught our attention. This was, it was done by Bubble 103, who's a teenager in South Africa, and she organized this project. If you look at the credits, you can see she credits many other Scratches. There's a project she did with many other kids. There's like a dozen kids in 5 countries around the world who did this project. It was called Color Divide. It's about a dystopian society where kids, as they grow up, are assigned colors based on their magical abilities. Clearly influenced by her own experiences growing up, still in a country still living through the scars of apartheid, and this issue of color being so, an important issue in the society. This is her way of playing out those issues, but doing it in collaboration with many others. So, she and her collaborators put this online. So as you see here, she says what she has done. Then she also talks about, all this storyline is by this person, 3 other people with her. The characters were designed by different people. So she gives credit to others who are doing it. So again, she's sort of learning what it's like to work in an online community. What are the ways of to have a good collaborator in an online community? And they put this online, and it was sort of viewed by about 30,000 people. It was loved by 2,800 people. It got more than 3,000 comments, people giving suggestions and feedback and encouragement. And it was remixed 82 times, meaning that people took the Color Divide project and made changes to the programming scripts, or to the graphic assets in order to make their own versions of it. And that's something we encouraged from the beginning on Scratch, that everything in Scratch was covered by Creative Commons license, meaning if you put something up there, everyone else is allowed to borrow from it, take from it. They should give credit, but they're allowed to take it. And this is something that a lot of people, a lot of the kids in the Scratch community react against. Someone starts making a modified version of their project, and they say, so-and-so stole my ideas. And then we talk about now in the Scratch community, everyone, has the right to build on each other's work, and we all benefit. If everyone shares, everyone benefits. And that's the culture of the community. And that's something that I think, Bubble 103 and her collaborators really understood. And we're sort of learning from one another as they built on things. So I think, always seeing how we can make this into a type of Samba school online. And then play. I sometimes call play the most misunderstood P. Because sometimes when people talk about play, they talk about fun and laughter. And I have nothing against fun and laughter, those are good things. But it's not what I think about when I think about play. And I don't think it's what Seymour was thinking about. So when I think about play, I think about, it's not an activity, it's an attitude. It's a sort of a way of engaging with the world. We are constantly trying new things, taking risks, testing the boundaries. That's a playful spirit. So when you have a playful spirit or a playful attitude, it's about trying new things and experimenting. And that's what we really want to support. Again, I'll show a video. This is a video that was from, this must be 1985. So it's when we were first doing the very first prototype of connecting Lego to the computer. And this video is from the very first workshop we did with kids. It was in the summer of 1985, connecting Lego to the computer. And it features one of the creations by one of the 4th grade students who was in this workshop. And you'll see a brief appearance by Seymour, because you'll see Nicky, the 4th grade student, talking about his invention to Seymour. So one thing you see in that video clip, the very first things Nicky says in the clip, he says, I was experimenting. So even just for kids to think about that that's what they're doing. It's not that, sort of, I was following the instructions, I was trying to do this assignment. He says, I was experimenting. And in fact, what Nicky had done, he'd started out by building a car, and the motor fell off, it wasn't attached well enough, and started vibrating across the table. And that sparked an idea. He then started wondering, I wonder if I could use the vibration to power something moving. And that was how he started with this. He sort of put the motor on a platform, and then put some Lego axles as legs, and started vibrating, but it wasn't vibrating strongly enough. And he remembered when he loved skateboarding, and when he would skateboard, he knew that when he whipped his arm around, it would sort of propel him forward. So he figured that this was a good thing to do, so he could attach an arm to the motor. As it whipped around, it did accentuate the vibrations and started moving forward. And he would turn the motor one way, it would vibrate forward and to the right. Turn the motor the other way, it would vibrate to the left, so he could steer it. So for me, this is sort of Nicky as tinkerer, Nicky as experimenter. And this is what we wanted to do when we were connecting Lego to the computer. Too often, this came up in the panel discussion earlier, that too often these type of activities are introduced in classrooms where, In the worst case, here's the instructions to follow it step by step, you're graded on how well you follow the instructions. But even if it says, here's the exact goal, try to do something that accomplishes this goal, which is much better. But I think here there's something even more what Nicky was doing. But if he was told that you have to make a car to get somewhere as fast as you could, again, that leaves open space for creativity. But he wouldn't have gone down this path. He was tinkering, he was experimenting, he was playing. So for me, this is the type of playing that we really want to support, of having kids constantly trying new things, tinkering, experimenting. And as we've tried to support, and of course there's many different aspects. The technology itself can't control how it is the kids use it. There's so much in the way it's introduced, the activities that it's part of, there's so many different elements. But we try to do our best. So, when we design Scratch, even just the way we make the graphical blocks, in many different, even graphic, so just the blocks in Scratch, snapping them together, sort of like Lego bricks. There's a playful feel to it, and you can put them together, then take them apart easily. So that's part of tinkering, is being able to put it together, but then take it apart. But then, we also, if you look at Scratch, if there's some blocks you're not using now, you just put them off to the side, and it's okay. It's okay if you just leave them there. Maybe you'll use them later. Look at a lot of other software, and you just can have the things that run, because otherwise, it doesn't run properly unless you have a clean desktop with just the things that are there that are needed. And we want to be a little bit messier, to encourage kids to experiment, to tinker, to try new things. Even things on Scratch, so on each project, you can designate that this project is a draft. And a little secret is, it doesn't really change anything if you check off that it's a draft. We want kids to feel comfortable sharing things and to say, this is a draft. It makes them feel more comfortable to say, look, I know this isn't finished, but this, I just want to share it, but it's not finished yet. And you want to give kids the confidence and the comfort to do that, it's good to share things while it's in process and try to do things to encourage it. I'll show one more recent video of the type of creative learning workshops we do today. It builds on this technology so this was 1985, so that's 32 years ago. So now we do workshops. This is a workshop that's using the Lego Redo Robotics Kit, which is meant for somewhat younger kids than Lego Mindstorms. But in our workshops, again, it's generally not about everyone make this particular thing, but encouraging kids to do creative exploration. In this case, for this workshop, we had kids come together, and the theme was a day at the park. And they were supposed to develop different activities, machines that you might see in a park, which could be an amusement park or another type of park. And this is some of the things that then kids created.
The goal of these creative workshops is really to give children an opportunity to come up with their own ideas, imagine something, and then figure out how to design it.
You should still keep this place and take this.
They need to be constantly exploring, experimenting.
Natural discovery, by testing things, by tinkering, by experimenting, by creating.
They're using Lego motors and sensors, and then if it doesn't work the way they want, they start revising it.
So we have to kind of adjust the motor power so they actually have power to knock the lights off.
So they're really learning through having a goal, having imagining something, and then bringing it to life. So rather than just thinking of the computer of something that I think, what am I supposed to do? They start thinking, what do I want to do with it? They start getting new ideas.
I think this connects to some of the discussion we're having on the panel before dinner about the value of having just these very simple robotics kits. This was not to do some sophisticated robot that's going to go collect ping pong balls and carry them somewhere and then ring a bell and do this and that. Again, there's value in doing that. But here we want to make it easy for kids to get started, to do a wide variety of different things. Again, diversity. Let kids do many different things based on what they're interested in a playful spirit. I think just from this video clip, you get some sense of the playful spirit. Part of it is giving lots of different materials. That's not just Lego bricks. Lego bricks are great for building certain things. We sometimes say Lego bricks are great for skeletons, but craft materials are good for skins. You want to have different types of materials for different sorts of things that you're creating. So when you have them, kids have when they use their imagination, you want to have a wide range of different materials to let them build and create the type of things they want to do. Then make it easy for them to try things, revise it, test it out. And in too many places, there's this focus on learning how to plan, come up with a plan. In many places that you'll see things like this introduced, say, before you touch materials, you have to come up with a plan, have a well-defined plan, and then you execute it and see if it works. Now again, planning like that can sometimes be useful. That's become sort of the standard way these things are introduced. For us, it's so much more useful to not have a fully developed plan. Of course, you might have some idea of where you're going, but then try it out, and you'll get new ideas as you try things out. So we've always, and that is our mind's part of a playful spirit. So when we talk about the P of play, that's what we're talking about, is to make sure the kids have that chance to continue to revise and adapt and try things out, modify their plans, even modify their goals. So definitely change the way they're, how they're going to go about things. But even you get a new idea, like Nicky did, came up with a new idea, and that's good as well. We encourage kids, a playful spirit lets you come with new plans, new goals, and that's the way they develop as a creative thinker. Again, we focus so much on the importance of creative thinking and how can we make sure that kids are supported as creative thinkers. So that's sort of, a little bit of an overview of those 4 P's of creative thinking that we talk about, how we've tried to put into practice, as we work on Scratch and other connecting the physical world things to Scratch, connecting Lego to Scratch. And again, in all of the cases, really growing out of the ideas that learned from Seymour. I'll end with a story that I've told a number of times, but I still like this story, so I'm going to tell it again. I don't know if any of you have heard me tell this story. This is actually, it was about 10 years ago. It was right about the time that Scratch came out. It might have been a little bit less. It was probably after Scratch was out for a year. I was giving a talk at a conference. It was different than this talk. I wasn't focused on Seymour. I was just talking about what kids were doing with Scratch and all the creative things kids were doing with Scratch. And at the end of the talk, during the question period, someone stood up and asked a question in a rather aggressive fashion and said, "Wasn't Seymour Papert doing these things 20 years ago?" And he meant it as a critique, and I took it as a compliment. I said, yes. And there were powerful reasons why Seymour was doing it 20 years ago, and they're the same reasons as why we're doing it today. We need to keep working on these things. It's not a problem that was raised and then solved. It's an ongoing vision and ongoing dream, Papert's dream, and we need to keep working on it. I'll be proud to spend the rest of my life continuing to work on it and to try to fulfill Seymour's dream, and I hope many of you will also join me in trying to fulfill Seymour's dreams. Thanks.